Tonight, we explore a quiet and unusual moment in human history. A moment so ordinary today that we rarely stop to question it. Clothing. Something we wear every day. Without thinking. Without noticing. And yet, there was a time when no human wore anything at all. No fabric. No coverings. No protection from the cold. Only skin exposed to the world. So when did that change? When did humans first decide to cover themselves? Was it for warmth? For protection? Or something deeper, something more human? Tonight, we travel back to a time before clothing existed. A world where humans lived as part of nature, not separate from it. And we slowly uncover the strange and quiet moment when everything began to change. So relax, slow your breathing, and let your mind drift to a world where the human body was never meant to be hidden. Imagine waking up in a world without clothes. There is no fabric brushing softly against your skin, no layers wrapped around your body, no barrier between you and the world outside. Only the air, only the earth, only the raw, direct touch of nature itself. The morning begins gently. A cool breeze moves across your body, not filtered, not softened, but real, immediate, alive. You feel every shift in the air, every change in temperature. As the sun begins to rise, warmth slowly spreads across your skin. Not through fabric, but directly. A quiet, natural heat that grows stronger as the light fills the sky. And when night returns, the warmth disappears. The air cools, then sharpens. The darkness brings with it a cold that settles into the body, not held back by anything at all. This was the world early humans lived in. For not just generations, but for hundreds of thousands of years. This was not unusual. It was not uncomfortable. It was simply life. Their bodies were not unprepared for this. Over long stretches of time, the human body adapted. Skin became slightly tougher, more resilient to the elements. Not immune, but capable. Long ago, human ancestors had more body hair, offering some natural protection. But as time passed, much of that hair disappeared. Why it faded is still a question explored by science, but what remained was a body that relied less on fur and more on something else. Sweat. The ability to cool the body efficiently. Under the heat of the sun, early humans did not overheat easily. Their skin released moisture, allowing air to carry heat away. This made them well suited for long movement across open land. Walking, running, enduring. In many ways, they were perfectly balanced for the environments they lived in. They did not need clothing, because they had never known it. There was no sense of something missing. No idea that the body needed to be covered. The human form, as it was, felt complete. Enough for warmth in many climates. Enough for movement. Enough for survival. But enough has its limits. Because the world itself was not constant. Over time, the earth began to change. Not suddenly. Not in ways that could be noticed in a single day or even a single lifetime. But slowly, quietly, inevitably. Temperatures shifted. Seasons grew less predictable. In some regions, the air became colder. Not just at night, but throughout entire seasons. Winds grew harsher. Rainfall changed. Landscapes transformed. And as early humans moved, as they explored new territories in search of food, water, and safety, they encountered environments very different from the ones their bodies had adapted to. The gentle warmth of familiar lands was not everywhere. In some places, the cold did not fade with the rising sun. It remained. Persistent. Unforgiving. A cold that touched the skin and did not leave. At first, this may have been a challenge, but not an immediate crisis. Humans could endure discomfort. They could seek shelter. They could gather around fire if they had it. But there is a difference between surviving for a short time and living in a place. And slowly, it became clear that the human body alone was not always enough. Bare skin, once perfectly suited to the environment, now felt exposed. Vulnerable. The same breeze that once felt refreshing could now feel biting. The same night air that once cooled the body could now take warmth away too quickly. The balance had shifted. And with that shift, a quiet problem began to emerge. How to protect the body in a world that was no longer always gentle. There was no sudden realization. No moment where humans stood still and understood exactly what needed to change. Instead, it was a gradual awareness. A feeling. A growing recognition that something was different. Something harder. Something that required a response. Because for hundreds of thousands of years, the human body had been enough. But now, in certain places, in certain moments, it wasn't. And in that quiet gap between what the body could endure and what the world demanded, the first idea of covering the body may have begun to form. Over long stretches of time, the earth did not remain the same. It is easy, from where we stand today, to imagine the world as something stable, predictable, familiar. But in the deep past, the planet was always in motion. Not in ways that could be seen from one day to the next, but across generations, across thousands of years. Change was constant. Temperatures shifted slowly, almost invisibly. What was once warm could become cool. What was once cool could grow cold. Entire regions transformed, not through sudden events, but through quiet, steady transitions. Cold periods came, and then, eventually, they passed, only to return again. These cycles would later be known as ice ages. But to the humans living through them, there was no name. Only experience. Only the gradual realization that the world around them was becoming different. As colder conditions spread across large parts of the earth, the air itself began to change. Winds grew sharper. Not just stronger, but colder, carrying with them a chill that did not quickly fade. Seasons became more extreme. Winters lasted longer. Summers, in some regions, became shorter, weaker, less reliable. The balance that once defined the environment began to shift. And in that shifting world, survival became more uncertain. In some places, life continued much as it always had. Humans living in warmer regions did not immediately feel the full impact of these changes. The sun still warmed the land. Plants still grew. Animals still moved through familiar patterns. For them, the body remained enough. Skin still met the air without danger. The rhythm of life remained steady. But humans were not a stationary species. They moved. They explored. They followed animals. They searched for new sources of food. They wandered beyond the boundaries of what was known. And as they did, they began to encounter something unfamiliar. At first, it may have been subtle. A slight drop in temperature. A cooler wind than expected. A night that felt longer, colder, harder to endure. But as they continued, as they moved further into new lands, that subtle difference became something undeniable. Cold. Not the gentle coolness of evening air, the kind that refreshes the body after a long day. But something deeper. Something sharper. A cold that did not simply touch the skin, but seemed to pass through it. Reaching into the body itself. The kind of cold that lingers. That does not disappear with movement or with the rising sun. The kind that stays. Settling into muscles. Slowing the body. Draining warmth over time. This was not an environment the human body had fully prepared for. For hundreds of thousands of years, bare skin had been enough. Enough to feel the world. Enough to endure it. But now, in these colder regions, that balance was breaking. The same body that once adapted so well began to face new limits. The breeze that once cooled now cut through the air with a biting edge. The night, once a time of rest, became something to endure. The ground itself could hold cold, pulling warmth away from the body as humans rested. And over time, this was no longer just discomfort. It became a challenge to survival. Because there is a difference between feeling cold and being unable to escape it. Humans could move. They could search for shelter. They could gather close together for warmth. But these were temporary solutions. The cold always returned. Persistent, unchanging, waiting, and slowly, quietly, a realization began to form. Not in words, not in a single moment of understanding, but through experience, through repetition, through the simple awareness that something was wrong, that something was missing. The human body, which had once been enough for every environment it encountered, was no longer enough here. Not always. Not in this kind of cold. This was not a failure of the body, but a sign of something new. A boundary. A limit that had been reached. And in that moment, not marked by any clear event, not recorded in any memory, a question began to exist. How do you survive in a world your body alone cannot handle? It was a quiet question, one that would not be answered all at once, but it would lead, slowly, to one of the simplest and most important changes in human history. Because when the world changed, humans would have to change with it. At first, there was no idea of clothing, no designs carefully imagined in the mind, no tools created for shaping fabric, no stitching, no patterns, no sense of style or appearance. There was no concept of fashion, no thought of how something might look. Only one thing existed in that moment. Need. A simple, immediate need. Imagine a human standing in the cold. The wind moving across bare skin. Not gentle, not refreshing, but sharp. The kind of wind that does not pass quickly, but lingers. Touching every part of the body. Taking warmth away, slowly but steadily. There is no protection. No barrier. Only skin, exposed to everything. At first, the body tries to endure. Muscles tighten slightly. Movement increases. Perhaps the person walks faster or searches for shelter. But the cold remains. It does not disappear. It follows. And in that moment, a quiet instinct begins to guide action. Not a clear thought. Not a plan. Just a feeling. A search. Looking for anything that might help. Anything that could block the wind. Anything that could hold warmth close to the body. And then, perhaps, something is noticed. An animal. Recently hunted. Its body still warm. Its skin still carrying heat. What was once simply a source of food, now becomes something else. Something useful in a new way. Perhaps, without fully understanding why. The human reaches for it. Lifts the hide. Feels its weight. Its texture. Its warmth. And then, places it across their shoulders. Not shaped. Not prepared. Not altered in any careful way. Just placed. A simple act. Almost accidental. But something changes. The wind no longer touches the skin directly. Its force is softened. The cold is still there, but it feels different. Less sharp. Less immediate. The warmth from the body no longer escapes as quickly. It lingers. Held close. For the first time, there is a layer. Something between the body and the world. It is not perfect. The hide may slip. It may feel heavy, uncomfortable in some ways. But none of that matters. Because it works. It blocks the wind. It holds warmth. It changes the experience of the cold just enough. And that just enough is everything. Survival is not always about complete solutions. Sometimes, it is about small improvements. A slight advantage. A moment where something becomes easier, less dangerous, more manageable. Standing there, wrapped in that simple covering, the human may not think of the future, may not realize the significance of what has happened. There is no awareness that this moment will matter. No understanding that something new has begun. Only a quiet sense that this helps. That this makes the cold a little more bearable. And when something helps, it is remembered. The next time the cold returns, the same action might be repeated. The hide is used again. Not as an accident this time, but as a choice. A simple decision shaped by experience. Others may notice. They may see what has changed. See how the wind no longer touches the skin in the same way. See how warmth stays longer. And slowly, they begin to do the same. Not because they were told. Not because it was taught in words. But because they observed. They understood. In the quiet way humans always have. Through watching, through trying, through learning. And so, what began as a single moment, a single action, begins to spread. Not quickly, not all at once, but gradually. One person, then another. One group, then another. Each repeating the same simple act. Taking something from the world and placing it between themselves and the cold. There are still no designs. No tools made specifically for this purpose. No effort to improve or refine it. Not yet. Only repetition. Only the growing awareness that this works. That this makes survival a little easier. And over time, that small difference begins to matter more and more. Because in a harsh environment, even the smallest advantage can shape the future. That first hide, draped across the shoulders, was not clothing in the way we understand it today. It had no name, no identity, no meaning beyond the moment. And yet, in that simple act, something had begun. Something quiet. Something unnoticed. A change so small it could easily be ignored. But a change that would slowly grow, until it became a permanent part of human life. And in that cold, distant world, with wind moving across open land, a human stood, wrapped in the skin of an animal, feeling, for the first time, that the world had become just a little easier to face. And that small moment may have been the beginning. Once something works, it is remembered, not written down, not recorded in any permanent way, but stored quietly in the mind, in the body, in experience. A human feels the difference, the way the cold no longer reaches as deeply, the way warmth stays a little longer. And that feeling becomes knowledge. The next time the wind rises, the same action is taken again. The hide is lifted, placed across the shoulders. Not by accident now, but by intention. And what was once a single moment begins to repeat. Repeated actions have a quiet power. They shape behavior. They create patterns. And over time, patterns become part of life. What helped once is trusted again. What is trusted is used again and again. And slowly, without any clear decision, a new behavior begins to settle into human existence. It becomes familiar, natural, expected. But humans do not live alone. They live in groups. Small groups, watching one another constantly. Observing, learning, understanding without words. So when one person does something that works, others notice. They see the difference. They see how the body is protected, how the cold is softened, and they begin to do the same. Not because they are told, not because they are instructed, but because they understand. In the quiet way humans always have, through observation, through imitation, through shared experience. And so the act spreads. From one individual to another. From one moment to many. Animal skins, once only part of the hunt, begin to take on a new meaning. Before, they were temporary. Something left behind after food was taken. But now, they are kept. Carried. Used again. They become something more than a byproduct. Something more than a leftover. They become useful. Valuable in a different way. Not just for survival in terms of food, but for survival against the environment itself. And as something becomes useful, humans begin to think about it differently. They begin to pay attention. To notice details. To ask, in their own way, how can this be better? At first, the hides are simple. Unchanged. Rough. Heavy. Still carrying parts that are not needed. But over time, small adjustments begin. Not through sudden invention, but through slow discovery. A piece of hide might be cleaned, scraped, unwanted material removed. Not because of a plan, but because it makes the hide easier to use. Lighter, more flexible, more comfortable against the skin. And once that improvement is felt, it is remembered, repeated, shared. Others begin to do the same. A rough surface might be softened, worked by hand, bent, stretched, until it feels different, until it moves more easily with the body, until it no longer feels like something separate, but something that fits. And again, that small improvement becomes knowledge, passed on not through words, but through action, through demonstration, through quiet learning. Over time, these small changes begin to add up. Each one simple, each one almost unnoticeable on its own. But together, they begin to transform the act. What was once just placing a hide over the body becomes something more deliberate, more refined, more reliable. The hide lasts longer, functions better, feels more natural, and slowly, the act itself changes. It is no longer something done only in moments of extreme cold. It becomes something done more regularly, more consistently, a response not just to danger, but to environment. And when something is done again and again, across many days, across many seasons, it becomes a habit, not a conscious choice each time, but something expected, something normal, a part of daily life. The human body, once always exposed, is now, at times, covered, protected, adjusted to a changing world. And with that shift, something new begins to take shape. Not fully formed, not yet what we would recognize as clothing, but no longer just a temporary solution. It becomes a practice, something that exists within the rhythm of life. As natural as gathering food, as natural as seeking shelter, as natural as staying close to the group. And over long stretches of time, this practice continues to grow, to evolve, to become more than what it first was. What began as a simple act, a hide placed across the shoulders in a moment of cold, has now become something deeper, something woven into human behavior, into survival, into daily existence. And slowly, without any single moment marking its arrival, a new part of human life emerges, quietly, naturally, almost invisibly, until one day, it is no longer new at all. It is simply the way things are. With time, humans began to change how they used these coverings. What had once been simple, something placed over the body without thought, began to shift. At first, the hide was only draped, laid across the shoulders, wrapped loosely around the body. It worked, but not perfectly. It slipped. It shifted with movement. It left parts of the body exposed. And slowly, through repeated use, humans began to notice these limits. Not as a clear problem to be solved, but as a feeling, an awareness that something could be better. And so, small changes began. A hide might be held tighter, folded in a certain way, adjusted to cover more of the body. These were simple actions, but they marked the beginning of something important. Because now, the covering was not just being used, it was being shaped. Not in a deliberate, planned way, but through experimentation, through trial, through quiet observation. A piece of material might be altered slightly, edges torn or cut, to remove what was unnecessary. Not for appearance, but for function. To make it easier to wear. To make it move more naturally with the body. At some point, tools became part of this process. Humans had already been using tools for hunting and preparing food. Stone tools, sharp-edged and carefully shaped. Bone tools, strong, precise, and useful in many ways. And now, those same tools found a new purpose. Instead of only cutting meat or shaping wood, they began to be used on hides. Scraping, cutting, Trimming, turning a rough piece of material into something more controlled, more intentional. The hide was no longer left in its natural form. It was changed, adjusted to meet a need. And with each small adjustment, understanding grew. A certain shape might cover the body better. A certain cut might allow easier movement. A certain size might hold warmth more effectively. None of this was written down. None of it was explained in words. But it was learned, remembered, passed on through action. One person watching another. One generation observing the previous one. And slowly, the coverings became more refined. Less accidental. More deliberate. But there was still a problem. Even shaped hides could not always stay in place. They slipped, fell, shifted with movement. And in a world where survival depended on reliability, this mattered. Something was missing. A way to hold these pieces together. A way to keep them secure. And then, at some point in this long and gradual process, something new appeared. Not suddenly. Not as a single invention, but as a quiet development. The first forms of stitching. It may have begun in the simplest way. A small hole made in a piece of hide. Another hole beside it. A thin material passed through. Pulled tight. Holding two parts together. At first, the materials used were simple. Plant fibers, twisted and strengthened. Animal sinew, taken from the body, flexible yet strong. Natural threads, found, used, adapted. And for guiding these materials, something even more precise was needed. Bone needles. Carefully shaped. Narrow. Pointed. Able to pass through material with control. These tools allowed something new. Not just covering, but connection. Separate pieces could now be joined. Edges brought together. Surfaces aligned. Held in place, not by hand, but by design. And with that, a transformation began. Coverings could now be fitted to the body. Not loosely, but intentionally. A piece could wrap around the shoulders and stay there. Another could cover the legs. Another the upper body. Movement became easier. Protection became more reliable. Warmth became more consistent. The human body was no longer simply interacting with the environment. It was being supported by something created. Something shaped with purpose. And this marked a quiet turning point. Because this was no longer just survival. No longer just reacting to cold or wind. This was creation. The act of taking something from the natural world and changing it. Improving it. Designing it to serve a need. It required thought. Observation. Memory. Skill. And with each new attempt, that skill grew. What worked was remembered. What failed was adjusted. And over time, these small acts of creation began to build upon one another. A better cut. A stronger stitch. A more effective shape. Each improvement, small on its own, but meaningful over generations. And slowly, without any clear moment marking the change, humans were no longer simply using coverings. They were making them, shaping them, designing them, turning raw material into something functional, something reliable, something that existed not in nature, but in human hands. And in that quiet process, something deeper began to emerge. Not just a way to survive, but a way to create. A way to shape the world, to meet human needs. And from that point forward, nothing would remain exactly the same. But clothing did not remain only a tool for warmth. At first, it had been simple. A barrier against the cold. A way to protect the body. A quiet solution to a physical problem. But as time passed, something else began to happen. Something quieter, more subtle, not immediately obvious, not something that could be clearly seen in a single moment, but something that slowly began to grow. Humans began to notice differences, not just in how coverings worked, but in how they appeared. One piece of material might look different from another. A hide taken from a different animal, with a different color, a different texture. Some darker, some lighter, some smoother, some rough. At first, these differences meant nothing. They were simply part of the material. But over time, as humans continued to shape, cut, and use these coverings, those differences became more noticeable, more present. A covering was no longer just something that protected the body. It was something that could vary, something that could be different from one person to another. One individual might wear a hide that fell in a certain way. Another might arrange theirs differently, wrapped tighter, looser, covering more of the body or less. These choices were small, almost unimportant at first, but they were choices. And where there is choice, meaning can begin. Slowly, very slowly, humans began to recognize these variations, to see them, to remember them. One person might always wear their covering in a certain way. Another might choose a different shape, a different style of wrapping, not for survival alone, but because it felt right, because it worked for them. And over time, these differences began to carry something more, something beyond function, a quiet sense of identity, not spoken, not explained, but understood. A person could be recognized not just by their face or their movement, but by how they wore what covered them. A familiar shape, a familiar arrangement, something that made them distinct. And as groups lived together, shared space, shared survival, another layer of meaning began to form. Belonging. Members of the same group might begin to use similar coverings, similar materials, similar ways of shaping and wearing them, not because it was required, but because it was shared. A quiet signal, one that said, "You are part of this group. You belong here. You are one of us." And just as belonging can be expressed, so can difference. Another group, living elsewhere, might use different materials, different methods, different ways of shaping what they wore. And without words, these differences could be seen, recognized, understood, not as conflict, but as distinction, as identity. And slowly, even something more complex may have begun to appear. Status. Though simple in its earliest form, it may have existed in subtle ways. A more carefully prepared covering, one that took more time, more effort, more skill. It might stand out, not loudly, but quietly, suggesting something about the person wearing it, their experience, their role within the group, their ability. None of this would have been formal. No rules, no system. But humans are observant. They notice patterns. They remember differences. And over time, those observations begin to form meaning. Even in its earliest form, clothing may have begun to say something. Not in words, not in symbols, but in presence, in appearance, in variation. A covering was no longer just protection from the cold. It became something that carried information, something that reflected the individual, their choices, their place, their identity within a group. And this marked a quiet but important shift, because now, clothing was not only about the environment, not only about survival. It had begun to connect to something deeper, to the human mind, to the way humans see themselves and each other. A layer once placed between body and world had become something more, a layer between people, a way of expressing difference and connection at the same time. And though no one would have understood it fully, no one would have stopped to name it, this small change would continue to grow, over generations, over thousands of years, until clothing would become more than protection, more than habit, more than practice. It would become expression, a quiet language without words. And in that early moment, long before cities, long before culture as we know it, a simple covering of the body had begun to tell a story. Not just about the world, but about the person wearing it. Covering the body changed more than survival. At first, it had been a simple response. A way to endure the cold. A way to make life a little easier in a changing world. But over time, its effects reached further than anyone could have understood. Because when something is placed between the body and the world, the experience of that world begins to change. Before coverings existed, the human body met everything directly. The air touched the skin without interruption. Every shift in temperature was immediate. The warmth of the sun, the coolness of shade, the chill of night. All of it was felt clearly. There was no distance, no barrier. The body and the environment existed in constant contact. But now, something had changed. The feeling of air on skin became different. Not gone, but softened. Filtered. The wind no longer struck the body with the same sharpness. It passed over a surface first, losing some of its force before reaching the skin beneath. Warmth lingered longer. Cold arrived more slowly. The sensations that once defined every moment were now slightly altered. Not removed, but reshaped. And with that reshaping, a quiet shift began. The boundary between the body and the environment started to move. Before, there had been no clear line. The human body was simply part of the world around it. Exposed, connected, open to everything. But now, there was a layer in between. A thin one. Simple, but real. A covering that separated skin from air, from wind, from the direct touch of the world. It was a small separation, easy to overlook, but significant, because even the smallest distance can change perception. The body was no longer completely exposed. There was something in between, something that could be adjusted, removed, added, changed. This meant that the experience of the world was no longer entirely fixed. It could be controlled, at least in part. A person could choose to cover more or less, to hold warmth or release it, to shield themselves or to open themselves again. This quiet ability, to place something between the body and the environment, introduced a new kind of awareness, an awareness of separation, and perhaps, over long stretches of time, this began to influence something deeper. Not just how humans felt the world, but how they understood their place within it. Before, humans had existed entirely within nature, not apart from it, not above it, but as part of its constant flow. Their bodies moved with the environment, responded directly to its changes, felt everything without distance. But now, there was a subtle shift, a sense that the body could be protected, adjusted, modified, that it did not have to meet the world in the same way at all times. This did not happen suddenly. There was no moment where a human stopped and thought, "I am separate from nature." It was quieter than that. Slower. A gradual change in experience, leading to a gradual change in awareness. The presence of a covering, however simple, created a small boundary. And boundaries, even small ones, can shape how something is perceived. The human body, once fully open to the environment, was now, in a small way, shielded. And in that shielding, there may have been the beginning of a new perspective. Not just as a creature moving through nature, but as something that could shape its interaction with it. Something that could create distance. Even if only a little. Even if only at times. And perhaps, this led to a deeper shift. A quiet transformation in how humans saw themselves. Not just as part of the natural world, but as something slightly apart from it. Not separate in a complete sense, but no longer fully merged. There was now a difference. A space. A layer. And in that space, something new could exist. Control. Choice. Awareness. The realization, however faint, that the world did not always have to be experienced in the same way. That the body could be protected. That the environment could be shaped, if only in small ways. And from such small changes, larger ones often grow. Because once a boundary is created, once a layer exists, it becomes possible to build upon it, to expand it, to explore it. And though these early coverings were simple, their impact may have reached far beyond their original purpose. They changed how the body felt the world. And in doing so, they may have begun to change how the mind understood it. A quiet shift, almost invisible, but deeply important, because in that small separation, between skin and air, between body and environment, there may have been the beginning of something larger. A new way of being, a new way of seeing, a new relationship between humans and the world they lived in. What makes this moment so strange is that it likely had no single beginning, no clear starting point, no first day that could be remembered, no moment where everything suddenly changed, no voice that spoke and said, "From today, we will wear clothes." There was no decision like that, no gathering, no agreement, no understanding that something new was beginning. Instead, it happened slowly, so slowly that no one living at the time would have noticed it. Change, in the ancient world, did not arrive all at once. It moved quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. One person, in one moment, feeling the cold, placing a hide across their shoulders. Not thinking of the future, not imagining a new way of life. Just responding, just surviving. And then, another moment, another day, the same action repeated. The hide used again. Not because it was new, but because it worked. And when something works, it returns. Again, and again, and again. Then another person sees, watches, understands. They try it too. Not because they are told. Not because it is taught. But because it makes sense. Because the body feels the difference. And slowly, what was once a single act becomes something shared. Not everywhere. Not all at once. But in small places. In small groups. A hide here. A covering there. Each moment separate, but connected. One group discovers it. Another learns it. Another adapts it in their own way. And over time, these small, scattered moments begin to form a pattern. Not planned, not organized, but real. A quiet shift in behavior. One person, one group, one moment at a time. A hide placed over shoulders. A covering used again. An idea, not spoken, but understood. And that idea spreads. Not like a sudden wave, but like something carried gently by time. Moving slowly across generations. Each generation inheriting small changes from the one before. Not noticing them as something new, only as something normal. Children grow up seeing coverings used. They do not question it. They do not wonder when it began. To them, it has always been there. Always part of life. And this is how change becomes permanent. Not through awareness, but through repetition. Through quiet acceptance. Through time. Until one day, though no one can say when, no one can point to the exact moment, something has fully changed. Humans are no longer living as they once did. They are no longer fully exposed to the world. The body is no longer always bare. There is now something in between. Something expected. Something familiar. And yet, no one noticed the moment it happened. No one marked the transition. No one stood at the edge of that change and said, "This is different." Because there was no edge. No clear line. Only a gradual shift. From one way of living to another. Until one day, without anyone realizing how or when, humans were no longer living without clothing. They were wearing it. Not as an invention. Not as a sudden discovery. But as the result of countless small actions. Layered over time. Moments so small, they seemed unimportant. Decisions so simple, they felt natural. And yet, Together, they created something lasting, something that would follow humanity forever. And that is what makes this moment so unusual. Not what it became, but how it began. Not with a single idea, but with many. Not with a single person, but with many. Not in a single moment, but across thousands. A change so quiet that it was never truly seen as it happened, only understood much later, when looking back and realizing that somewhere in that distant past, without anyone noticing, everything had already changed. And so tonight, as you rest comfortably, wrapped in layers of fabric, it is worth pausing, just for a moment, to remember how ordinary this feels. The softness against your skin, the gentle weight of cloth, the quiet warmth it holds around you. It feels natural, effortless, almost invisible in your awareness, something you rarely think about. And yet, this simple act, this everyday habit, has a deep and ancient history, a history that stretches far beyond memory, far beyond cities, far beyond written words, far beyond anything we would recognize as civilization. It is a history shaped not by design, but by survival, by change, by countless small decisions made in moments of need. There was no plan, no invention in the way we understand it today, no single mind imagining clothing as an idea. Instead, there were moments, cold air pressing against bare skin, winds that did not pass quickly, nights that grew longer and harsher. And in those moments, humans responded, not with certainty, but with instinct, with curiosity, with the quiet desire to endure. A hand reaching for something nearby, an animal hide still carrying warmth, lifted, placed, not shaped, not perfected, just used. A simple act, almost nothing, and yet, it made a difference. The wind felt weaker, the cold less sharp, the body more protected. And when something changes the way the body feels, it is remembered, not as an idea, but as an experience, something worth repeating. So it happened again, and again, across different places, different people, different moments in time, each small action adding to something larger, without anyone realizing it. And this is how so many of the most important changes in human history begin. Not loudly, not suddenly, but quietly, through repetition, through need, through time. A history shaped by survival, where every choice mattered, every improvement, no matter how small, had the potential to last. And as these moments continued, as coverings became more common, something else began to form, something less visible, a kind of quiet innovation. Not innovation in the modern sense, with tools and plans and designs, but something more gradual, more instinctive. Humans began to notice, to adjust, to improve. A hide might be placed differently, wrapped more tightly, held in place more securely. Edges might be trimmed, surfaces softened. Small changes, small refinements, each one making life just a little easier. And over time, those small refinements became part of life itself, passed from one person to another, from one generation to the next, not taught in words, but learned through observation, through imitation, through experience. And so, slowly, almost invisibly, a new part of human life took shape, not as a sudden transformation, but as a quiet evolution. And if we could travel back, far into that distant past, into a world that feels both familiar and strange, we might witness one of those moments. A cold and unfamiliar landscape, the air sharp, the wind steady, a small group of humans moving carefully through their environment, living as they always had, adapting as they needed. And among them, one individual pauses, reaches down, lifts an animal hide, heavy, rough, still carrying the memory of warmth, and places it across their body, not knowing anything beyond that moment, not thinking of the future, not imagining what this act might become, only responding, only surviving. And yet, in that quiet, unremarkable action, something begins, something that will not end, because that moment does not disappear. It is repeated, shared, remembered, carried forward through time, until it becomes something permanent, something universal, something so deeply woven into human life that it feels as though it has always been there. And tonight, as you rest, wrapped in layers of fabric, feeling warmth without effort, comfort without thought, you are part of that long story. A story that began not with intention, but with necessity, not with knowledge, but with experience. A story shaped by countless lives, across countless generations, all connected by small, quiet moments like that one. Moments that seemed simple, but were never insignificant. Because sometimes, the things that last forever do not begin with great events. They begin with something much smaller. A single action, a single choice, a single human, standing in the cold, lifting a piece of the world around them, and placing it across their body, not knowing that they were beginning something that would last forever.